Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really interesting, something that kept popping up in the articles you send us. How to actually train your brain to think directly in English.
Yeah.
Our goal here is to figure out the best ways to, well, bypass that internal translation step
Uh-huh.
and unlock more fluent, more natural English, when you're speaking, listening, even writing.
It's a big one. And looking at the different takes you shared, it's clear that frustration with mental translation is uh, pretty universal for learners.
Right. It seems like the default starting point.
It is, absolutely. But
Hmm.
like several of these pieces pointed out, it really can become a bottleneck. You're essentially doing double duty, right? Processing in your native language, then again in English.
Which must slow you down.
Oh, definitely. It slows down your speech because you're searching for the right words, the equivalents.
Yeah.
And it can also lead to phrasing that just sounds a bit off.
Like a direct translation that doesn't quite fit.
Exactly. That "I have cold" example we saw in one of the forum threads really hits that nail on the head. It's understandable, but not quite natural English.
Exactly. And one of the research articles you highlighted suggests that thinking directly in English does more than just speed things up, right? It seems to build a deeper, more intuitive grasp of the language.
That's right. If you connect that to some of the cognitive science stuff and the language acquisition piece, when you stop constantly translating, your brain actually starts making direct links.
Between concepts and the English words themselves.
Precisely.
Yeah,
And that leads to much quicker, more fluid speech. You lose that mental juggling act we mentioned. Your responses become faster because you're thinking in the language.
I can totally see how that would boost confidence too. That was something listeners mentioned quite a bit. If you're not second guessing your
You
translation.
feel more sure of yourself. Exactly. That little pause, that hesitation while translating. Sometimes other people might read that as uncertainty or maybe like you don't quite understand.
Hmm.
Thinking directly in English lets you respond more decisively. And thinking about that article on auditory processing,
Mm.
when your brain's already in English mode, it processes spoken English much quicker too. You're getting the meaning directly.
Ah, so you're not spending mental energy on the translation step while listening.
Exactly. It frees up your brain power.
It's like tuning into the right radio station. Finally, you hear it, you get it.
This is a good way to put it. And, that language learning blog you sent over made a great point about pronunciation as well.
How so?
Well, when you're thinking in English, you're naturally internalizing the rhythm, the sounds, the intonation more effectively.
Ah, so you start to hear it internally the right way.
Yeah. You hear English in your mind more like a native speaker would, and that subtly shifts how you actually produce the sounds yourself.
Okay, so the benefits are pretty clear then. Faster speaking, more confidence, better listening, even improved pronunciation. These seem to be the rewards for making that mental switch, based on everything we've looked at. But what stops people? What are the common mistakes or habits that, according to these sources, make it so hard to think in English?
Well, pulling together the user comments and the advice from that language learning guide, probably the biggest one is just relying too much on translation.
The default habit.
Yeah. If your brain's automatic response is always think in native language first, then translate, it never really gets the practice it needs to build sentences independently in English.
It needs to flex that muscle.
Right. It's like that training wheels analogy that popped up a few times. They help at the start, but you have to take them off eventually to actually learn to ride, to find your own balance.
That makes total sense. You lean on the translation bridge so much your brain doesn't bother building its own direct English pathways. What's another common hurdle these sources mention?
Something several pieces brought up was learners getting stuck on grammar, focusing too much on getting the grammar perfect while you're trying to form the thought.
Trying to be perfect internally before even speaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That drive for flawless sentences in your head, it just slows everything right down.
Yeah.
And as one article pointed out, even native speakers don't consciously vet every single grammar rule as they talk.
Right. It's more intuitive, built up over time, like that immersion article stressed. So aiming for perfection in every thought, especially early on, actually works against fluency. What else gets in the way?
Fear. The fear of making mistakes. That came up again and again in the forums.
People worry about sounding wrong.
Yeah, so much so that they hesitate even to think in English. It creates this negative cycle. You avoid practicing because you're scared, but practice is exactly what you need.
Hmm.
But like that motivational blog post said, mistakes are just part of learning. It's fundamental. Fluency comes from practice and learning from those errors, not from being perfect right out of the gate.
Absolutely. Every mistake is data, really, a chance to adjust.
Okay, and what's the last big obstacle the sources flagged?
Lack of immersion. Just not enough English in daily life. That was mentioned across the board.
So if your world is mostly your native language, your brain defaults to it naturally. It's hard to switch your thinking to English if you're not consistently hearing it, reading it, using it.
Right. If English is just for, say, a class or a specific study time.
Your brain doesn't get that constant exposure it needs to make English the go-to for your thoughts. It stays compartmentalized.
Okay, got it. So the main roadblocks we've pulled from the sources are over-relying on translation, getting hung up on grammar perfection internally, fear of mistakes, and just not enough daily immersion.
That sums it up pretty well.
So now let's shift to the how. Based on these articles and discussions, what are some actual practical steps you can take to start training your brain to think directly in English?
Well, what's nice is that many resources suggest starting really simple. One common tip is just consciously naming things around you in English.
Just looking around and labeling?
Yeah, deliberately. Look at your desk, computer, lamp, pen, notebook. Then you can build on that. Describe simple actions related to those things.
So not just cup, but
I am drinking water from my cup. Or I'm typing on the keyboard. It helps forge that direct link between your world and English words, skipping the translation step.
creating those direct pathways we talked about.
Right.
Okay, that feels doable. What's next?
Another really common recommendation is talking to yourself in English.
Out loud or internally?
Either. But internally is a great start. Some forum folks admitted it feels weird at first, but it's super effective. Low pressure.
Because nobody's listening.
Exactly. You can do it anywhere. Getting dressed, I'm putting on my blue shirt, making breakfast, I need to toast the bread. Just narrate your life in simple English. The sun is shining today.
I like that. A safe space to just try it out. What other steps came up?
Using an English-to-English dictionary was highlighted quite a bit.
Instead of English to native language.
Right. It might seem harder initially, but it forces you to understand English words using other English words. It keeps you within the language system.
Ah, so if you look up thrilled.
You find a definition, like very excited and happy. You're building connections within English, not constantly referencing back to your first language.
That's a subtle but powerful shift. Building the network inside English itself. What else?
Starting simple with sentence structure in your head. A lot of guides mention this. Learners often try to think in really complex sentences right away and get frustrated.
So break it down.
Yeah. Start with short, basic thoughts. Instead of wrestling with, given the weather forecast, I should probably take my umbrella when I go out later. Just start with, need umbrella, or might rain.
Right.
As you get more comfortable, the thoughts will naturally get more complex. Start with the basics.
Makes it less intimidating. Build up from simple blocks. Good one. Another technique.
Developing an English inner voice. This is a recurring idea.
Consciously making your internal monologue English.
Yes. Instead of your thoughts automatically running in your native language, make an effort to have those little mental chats with yourself in English. Planning your day. Okay, what's first? Check emails. It's about actively using the English parts of your brain for that internal chatter. You could even ask yourself simple questions in English during the day. Where did I put my keys?
That sounds like it could really help make it more automatic over time, less like a chore. And the final big strategy.
No surprise here. Immersion. It came up constantly. Surround yourself with English as much as you realistically can.
Podcasts, videos.
Music, books, articles, changing your phone language maybe. It's about giving your brain that constant input it needs to start processing and, eventually, thinking in English naturally.
Right.
Create that English environment.
Okay, let's quickly recap those core strategies from the materials. Name things around you in English, talk to yourself in English, use an English to English dictionary, start with simple thoughts, develop that English inner voice, and immerse yourself.
Run it.
These all feel like things you can actually do. Now, how do you make them stick? How do you build a habit? What daily exercises did the sources suggest?
Well, the big takeaway from the practice guides is consistency. It's a skill, like any other, needs regular workouts.
Makes sense.
So one effective routine is to start and end your day in English, mentally.
How does that work?
When you wake up, just take a minute to outline your plans for the day in English. Simple stuff. It's Wednesday, meeting at 11, need to buy milk. Then, before sleep, review the day, again in English. Finish the report, talk to Alex, watch the movie.
Kind of bookending the day with English thinking, priming the pump in the morning, reviewing at night.
Exactly. It helps frame your day in the target language.
Cool. What's another daily practice?
Implementing a no translation rule for a set period each day. Several sources suggested this.
Like 30 minutes of English-only thinking?
Yeah, something manageable. During that time, you really make a conscious effort. If you catch yourself slipping back into your native language, just gently redirect
Back to English.
back to English. It might feel tough at first, absolutely, but it builds that mental muscle.
Discipline.
Have
Okay, what else for the daily routine?
talking to yourself aloud in English. We mentioned talking internally, but vocalizing adds another layer. Reinforces it. Seems to. Just for a few minutes. Describe what you're doing as you do it. Making tea. Oh, boiling the water. Where's the tea bag? Ah, here it is. Pouring the water now.
So turning thoughts into actual spoken words, even if just for yourself.
Yeah, it makes it more concrete. Solidifies the thinking process.
Okay. Another way to weave it into daily life.
Using English during routine activities. This came up a lot. Cooking, driving, walking the dog, exercising.
Instead of letting your mind just drift in your native language.
Right. Actively try to think in English about what you're seeing or doing. Yeah. On your commute. Wow, traffic is bad. That's a new shop. I wonder what they sell. Making English the background noise, the default during those everyday moments.
I like that. Integrating it, not isolating it. And one last daily exercise.
Keeping a simple English journal. Consistently recommended.
Writing down thoughts.
Yeah, just a few sentences a day. What happened, how you feel, maybe a goal. The key is not to stress about perfect grammar. Focus on expressing yourself.
Just getting the thoughts out in English.
Exactly. Plus, it gives you a record. You can look back later and see how far you've come.
Okay, so the daily habits to build. Start and end the day in English. Have no translation time. Talk to yourself out loud. Think in English during routine tasks. And keep a simple journal. These seem really practical.
They are. It's about building consistency.
No, it's not always going to be smooth sailing. People hit roadblocks. Based on listener feedback and the sources, what are common hurdles and how can you overcome them?
Yeah, it's really important to acknowledge that, like our listeners shared, struggling is normal. The biggest one, as we've said, is that automatic switch back to your native language.
The default programming.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
When that happens, the advice is be patient. Don't beat yourself up. Just notice it and gently shift back to English. Maybe start with just a word or a short phrase.
Small steps back.
Exactly. And keep using that English to English dictionary. It helps keep your brain in English mode.
Okay, so gentle redirection, patience. That's another common frustration. Yeah.
Getting stuck on a word you don't know. It's so tempting to just stop or grab a translator.
Yeah.
But a more effective strategy, suggested in several guides, is to try and describe the word using the English you do know.
Work around it.
Yes. So if you blank on screwdriver, maybe you think,
Yeah.
the tool, use it for screws,
Yeah.
turn them. It keeps you thinking and communicating in English, even with a vocabulary gap.
That's clever. Circumlocution, basically. Keeps the flow going. Okay, final common challenge.
Losing motivation. Feeling like you're not making progress.
Because it's gradual.
Very gradual. It's hard to see the small changes day to day. So the advice, especially from the motivational pieces, is to track your progress somehow.
How?
That journal we mentioned is great for it. Or record yourself speaking now and then. Maybe talk in front of a mirror. When you look back at recordings or entries from weeks or months ago.
You can actually see the improvement.
Exactly. It provides tangible proof that you are getting better, which is hugely motivating. It reinforces that persistence pays off. Patience and consistency are key, as so many people pointed out.
Really useful ways to handle those bumps in the road. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway from exploring all these different sources on thinking in English?
I think the core message, really, the thread through all of it, is that thinking in English isn't some magic talent. It's a skill.
A learnable skill?
Absolutely. It develops with consistent practice, using the right kinds of strategies. Anyone can learn to do it.
And drawing from everything we've discussed, those first steps seem to be start small, don't expect overnight results, be consistent, and crucially, don't let that fear of making mistakes paralyze you.
Couldn't agree more. Every little attempt, every small practice session adds up.
Which brings us to a question for you listening in. Thinking about all these ideas and techniques we've pulled from the sources, which one feels like the best starting point for you?
Yeah, which strategy are you going to try first? Maybe starting today or tomorrow.
We genuinely love to hear how it goes if you want to share, but the main thing is to just start.
Keep practicing, Keep surrounding yourself with English, and gradually that shift towards thinking more naturally in the language will happen.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.